The Wendigo, a legendary creature that first appears in stories told by the Algonquin tribe. Inhabiting parts of Canada and the US, these creatures were said to be once human, who at one point became cannibals, either out of desperation or for pleasure. They became consumed with the intense desire to eat more and more, with an increasingly insatiable appetite. Many describe the Wendigo as walking on two legs, standing anywhere from 14 to 17 feet tall, with the head and antlers of a deer. It was gaunt to the point of emaciation, its desecrated skin pulled tightly over its bones. With its bones pushing out against its skin, its complexion was the color of an ashy gray, like death. Its eyes were pushed back deep into their sockets. Its lips were tattered and bloody. The Wendigo is said to give off a strange and eerie odor of decay and death and decomposition, but mostly corruption. Tonight, we're going to take a look at the Wendigo. But what if I told you there was another story to be told? So tonight, this is going to be our story time. Hello everyone, this is Jill and Joe, your two favorite conspiracy theorists, and tonight we're going to talk about the Wendigo. Everybody's heard the same legend of the Wendigo, where it comes from and what it looks like, and that it's, a human that got greedy and turned into a cannibal due to either desperation out of hunger, starvation, or they were doing something nefarious that they shouldn't have been doing in the first place. So it's I always sort of thought it was a cautionary tale about cannibalism.
Right.
Have you heard anything about the Wendigo before?
I didn't realize I had heard about the Wendigo until we had our last discussion regarding its characteristics and its cannibalism, and then I made a little bit of a reference to a show called Hannibal and realized that the cannibalism, the antlers, and all that was a theme that constantly reoccurred in that show. So then it all kind of made sense. And then you were telling me more and more about how it's really permeated a lot of our stories, and you really don't even notice it. It's just kind of there, and it's pervasive, and it's all over the place.
Right.
So it's
and
fascinating.
Some of it's not even, like you said, like some of it you don't even really realize that it is about a Wendigo.
Right.
Like in Pet Cemetery, the reason that everyone's able to come back to life and reanimate is because of the magical powers of the Wendigo. That's really what the creature is that starts the whole story off. But it's never really, stated that that's what it is. But I did a little bit of digging, and that is.
So you've done some digging, right?
I did.
We've got some new information that's interesting.
Yeah. So when I was doing my digging and my research on the Wendigo, well, first of all, we had sort of came to the conclusion that it just sort of seemed like just a lore, like a cautionary tale of, that came out of the time. Yeah, that came out of a time when there was famine or there was no food around. It was sort of just, it's like one of the 7 deadly sins out of greed and just.
Right. And it kind of paralleled other folklores around different countries and stuff like what was it, the vampire or something like that. So we kind of figure, and it kind of was rooted in folklore and mystery, and do right or pay the price.
Yep. Until I came across a town called Helltown in Ohio. So it's an abandoned town that President Ford had called for the evacuation in 1974, claiming that he wanted to turn it into a national park. However, if you go back and start from the very beginning, in 1806, it was settled, and apparently the land was barren. And the Algonquin tribe was prevalent in that area. And I guess the settlers were starving because they couldn't grow anything. The land was just not fruitful at all. So they told them about a creature that they could offer different things to. And then if you left them like a goat or any sort of food, it would come, take the offering, and bless the land. So they thought, okay, we'll try that because nothing else is working. And after a while, the land became fruitful. And so every year, the settlers would leave an offering for this creature. Now, the creature in everything that I've looked up so far has been pretty much exactly what the Wendigo is described as looking like. And we're talking about settlers that have a background in Catholicism. So they're, a Christian value. So eventually, after leaving this creature, just like a chicken or a goat or whatever, it eventually turns into them leaving human sacrifices.
So it turns more cultish.
Mm-hmm. And more fruitful the land became, the more sacrifices they left. Now, there are markers that were left behind every time they did see a Wendigo, sort of like we saw it in this area, we saw it in that area. So they left stone markers with a W on it. So you would know where the Wendigo was spotted. And eventually, after so many years had passed, they went back to their Catholic roots and sort of buried this dark history and left that behind.
So they got away from it.
Mm-hmm. So in 1966, 2 kids go missing. 3 kids go into the forest to do whatever. 1 makes it out. 2 never heard from again. But the 1 kid that's left has memories of a tree with a goat and rope attached to it, some fruit, whatever, left on the ground, but the kids are missing. So they start looking for them, and there's evidence that there's a possibility that the kids could have been part of that sacrificial rite that happened at that time. So
thinking the cult went underground and came back?
Well, eventually it leads to that satanic cult. And it's infiltrated, and it turns into an entire, Waco situation. But
so they actually found a cult.
There was a cult that was found around that area.
Okay.
That was still practicing those rituals for the Wendigo.
Okay.
And a little bit later, the military is called in to do some surveying of the land, right? Because we know that in a couple of years, Ford is going to call for the evacuation of Helltown. Now, during that survey, they find more and more ritualistic activity in that area.
Because you have surveyors going out and looking at stuff, right? Okay.
Yep. So in that area, it's also said to be a very haunted area, probably because of all the occult practices and things like that. Who knows what they were doing and what they were calling out. But Um, when the surveyors came out, they found an abandoned slaughterhouse. And in the slaughterhouse, there's evidence of very large animals being held there. Big, huge cages, bigger than normal, nothing that you would need for, pigs and cows and whatever, chickens, whatever you're supposed to be doing in a slaughterhouse. This seemed a little bit more, something else was going on there. Plus, I'm just saying, they found some antler cutters, which I don't know, maybe that's normal in a slaughterhouse, probably. But it's interesting that there's these really big cages plus antler cutters and evidence of things that don't seem that it's just for a regular typical slaughterhouse.
So the undercurrent would be possibly that somehow they're capturing Wendigos, perhaps?
Perhaps.
And that they're storing them in this makeshift slaughterhouse.
Mm-hmm. Because near the slaughterhouse, they found an underground bunker, like a government bunker, that was evacuated because everything is pretty much left behind in a rush. There's conference rooms, science labs, but the laboratories, again, have these big, huge cages. So a couple of theories that run rampant about this town is, one, there was a chemical spill of some sort, and Ford had to evacuate like overnight. Even though the premise of the evacuation was they wanted to turn it into a national park. The other train of thought is, like we just said, they captured something prevalent to the area that dates back to definitely to 1806. However, the interesting thing is that it was never made a national park until 1986. So in 1974, they evacuate. In 1976, they start buying up the surrounding area of Helltown. The government does, and hold on to it, do nothing with it. It isn't turned over to the National Park Service until 1986.
Now, why was it evacuated again?
Well, that's the question.
Oh, there's no formal evacuation orders?
The formal evacuation is because he wanted to turn it into a national park.
Okay.
But there's nothing else about anything else except for all the remnants of what's been left over.
So if we wanted to take a conspiracy theory, right? That there's something to this occult, that perhaps government entities were involved with the bunker.
Right.
And something was found, discovered, and that forced an evacuation.
Now maybe they did capture a Wendigo.
Oh.
And say it got loose. Because what would make an entire bunker stop dead in their tracks and run like hell and get out?
Everyone's dip out.
Right.
Well,
I did a little bit more digging.
Ooh, there's more?
There is more.
Uh-oh.
There's always more. And I started to wonder, again, you've got a national park, you've got a national forest area with possible cryptid ties. How does that all tie in together with what we had talked about earlier with Hellier and what's coming out of the Mammoth Cave system? So I did a little bit of research and I found out.
the Mammoth Cave system is just a colossal cave system, right? And it covers a good
It's the
portion of.
largest. It's the largest cave system in America.
Okay, and it stretches from what is it? It's on the East Coast, right? We're talking Kentucky and just a whole swath of states, right?
Well, in 1972, they discovered that the Mammoth Cave system feeds into the Flint Ridge Cave system, which runs right through Ohio.
Oh, so the Hellier Cave, well, the Mammoth Cave system, where there are known to be anomalies, like we discussed in the Hellier episode with UFOs, green goblins, screaming, all sorts of weird stuff, more occult activity, has a link.
And you have the quartz, right?
Right, right, and that plays a factor because magnetic, geomagnetic waves on quartz creates other issues, creates anomalies, creates energies. So now there's a link between Ohio, where we have the Algonquin Wendigo sightings, and so now they're linked up somehow, perhaps?
That's what I think.
Well, there you go. Now, wouldn't that be fascinating? What if the government was researching these cave systems somehow back in the, 40s, 50s?
In the 70s, right? 70s. Okay.
And they're finding stuff, That would be fascinating because there's been stories. I mean, there's stories of creatures being let loose on Air Force bases.
Right.
Like out in Nellis, the security forces used to have a creature that they talked about, and actually pointed back to one of Stephen King's movies where something got out and they didn't know what it was. They couldn't track it down, got out of a bunker. So what's to say someone didn't capture a Wendigo, maybe?
Exactly. Especially if you have, like we've always said, why are there links from one tribe to a different tribe that's not even in the same area, or one location to a different location, but they have similar lores? Yes, it can bleed into, one person moved from this area and they brought that legend with them to the new area. But I don't know, there's just too many coincidences of similarities of so many different stories and creatures and things that it's hard for me to really believe that it's just word of mouth traveling.
So we've also discussed, the Bigfoot, the cryptid, the ultimate cryptid,
right?
And Politis and his theory, sort of, that you'll find large granite deposits along water, and you tend to have these things occur in those areas, national forests. Wouldn't it be fascinating? Let's just go crazy now. What if the national forest system was designed to keep people out of these areas? Wouldn't that be weird? Or if they knew something long ago? Sounds crazy, but what if?
I mean, not necessarily, especially when you have, which we'll talk about in another episode, we'll dig a little bit deeper into that, but especially when you've got such a huge amount, undocumented amount of people that just go missing in national forests.
But yeah, and it goes even further than that, because then you have the whole police force, a security force that's on these national parks, or they don't talk about it.
Right, because the national forest system is not made to keep documentation on exactly how many people go missing each year in these parks.
Supposedly, right? What if, like the Air Force, we don't track UFOs, but we got a whole underground system that monitors.
Right, but I mean, like, as far as they're telling us, if your kid missing, they can't give you any answers because they just don't document it, supposedly.
Which, who doesn't document stuff? Come on.
We know that's bullshit, so.
Totally.
Seriously.
Wow. So what if the people of Hellier, that group, what if they had, I mean, this is a big thing, right? I mean, it's a huge.
I think it's a big thing.
Right. Well, I'm saying, like, what if their data, if they had gotten off the occult thing and their data had led them to these cave systems? I mean,
I
if you're
agree.
doing the research and you're seeing all this stuff, I mean, it's got to be out there.
Most definitely.
But then
Absolutely.
you are an avid researcher and you go sniffing through things that most people don't bridge and get. So, yeah.
I mean, but the folklore of the Wendigo could be uh, twofold. It could be, yes, an Algonquin um, true story this creature really is out there.
Mm-hmm.
But I think also it could have been used as a cautionary tale for, cannibalism, and, you could turn into this sort of like, something, if you're a bad kid, the Krampus is going to come get you if you're not good all year, that type of thing.
Right.
But I mean, there has to be some sort of factual based reality in the story, in the folklore of it. It may not be exactly everything that we've been
Well,
told,
I've
but
always
I mean,
felt,
there's parts of it that's true.
yeah, like I've always felt wherever there's a fascinating story, there's always a hint of truth. There's always a vein of truth in a story that may or may not be embellished. There's something real going on inside of that story.
Right.
So, the Wendigo, for all its fanciful storytelling, there is a vein of truth in there somewhere. There must be, along
But what
with,
if the Wendigo? But what if the Wendigo is just a form of a Bigfoot?
well, I mean, it could be, very well be, yes. But like we talked about, like in the very beginning, what if it's a species? We're dealing with different species on these cryptids that we've never tracked because we can't, because they're not in our known reality, I guess you could say, our vision, our perception, so we can't track them, but they're out
Mm-hmm.
there.
Yeah. Right.
So yeah, it
Right.
could very well be that type of thing that we can't track. That would be fascinating.
But there is and always will be some sort of evidence left behind if you know where to look for it, that you can visually see if you
Yes,
want to.
because you've seen it, or we've seen it. It's been talked about with Bigfoots. Their
And
stomping grounds have telltale signs of them being there.
well, yeah, and then what about all these people that were called crazy for UFO sightings and there was no way that that was true, and now all of a sudden we're not going to deny that it's out there.
We can't.
Right?
Well, and that's the thing. That's always been, I mean, a way of protecting secrets was to call the people that are learning about these secrets crazy.
Mm-hmm.
So if they're nuts, nobody's going to believe them. And or if you guide them along a different path to kind of go around what you're working on. Oh yeah, there's UFOs, but go look at these ones over here. Don't look at ours. Same thing could be said about these stories. I know that many government agencies have looked into occult themes. They have gone and researched a lot of that stuff. It was prevalent in Nazi Germany. It was all of those scientists came over Operation Paperclip. I guarantee you it continued. We got into things like remote viewing and all of that stuff. And I know the Nazis were big on researching ancient
Mm-hmm.
civilizations because they were determined to find out if they were the super race. One of the ways that they did that was to go deep into history and track and research and do all of their research to discover about the ancient civilizations, how they happened, who was better essentially. And they got a lot of data, a lot of information that we took over for the most part, and stuff that we don't know about that's never been talked about that is going to come out here shortly, I believe. You're going to find out about it. But it's fascinating that they're doing that type of research. It's been known. We never got wind of it because we didn't really care. We're out here doing our jobs, playing on our phones. So
Right.
it's not really interesting to us. But stuff like this, I'm sure they've delved into it.
Oh,
No,
I'm
no
sure.
doubt in my mind.
I'm sure.
You know, they
So,
did
I
crazy
mean, I
things like,
think.
good.
Mhm.
They did crazy things like Operation Montauk and were, time travel and all this other stuff. So, I mean, those are the things that got out, but there's much more crazy stuff that never saw the light of day.
Right. Well, I mean, I think that in the very beginning of this research, I think you and I both thought, okay, there's no way. It just sort of sounds like a myth, a story, a
But
cautionary tale.
How does it permeate a whole town? Like,
right.
You have a whole occult thing. I get it, occult stuff.
Right.
People don't really delve into it. It's a lot of it is, like Koresh and all that stuff. It's what they envision.
Right.
It's what they make up. So I don't lend a whole lot of credence to that type of stuff. But you got to wonder where it came from. It's got roots somewhere. It came from somewhere.
Well, and I don't think it necessarily can just die as far as a town built on the history of sacrifice,
right,
and human sacrifices. I think that, definitely there's going to be some subset of people that are going to continue with the practice. Just like we talked about in Hellier, that they still leave offerings to the Green Man.
Yeah. That's crazy. I mean, I've never gotten into it because I don't understand it, but I'm wondering how big of a role it plays in our fundamental, I don't want to say society. Like, I feel that it plays a major role in our government, in our celebrities, in a whole host of things that we're not aware of. So if you're talking occult, you can get into the whole celebrity side of things where, what is it? You have to show who you are somehow. That's one of the occult themes is you have to be out there and show who you really are. So a lot of the things that they do are, they cover one eye, they hang out with major occult members, and they go have dinner. They have like where they put the sushi on the body, or they have like fake things where they have like a fake body out there and they're pretending to be cannibalists or stuff like that. So, I mean, I saw a show. There's a lot of that stuff out there, and I wonder how pervasive it is. And then you have the whole undercurrent of, what is it, Epstein and all that stuff, and the girls and the human trafficking and all that, and there's chunks of that all across the United States that nobody really knows about. They ignore and whole Pizzagate this is big, it's huge. I mean, your Wendigo kind of scratches the surface on a whole bunch of stuff,
Right.
And it seems out there. It seems out there until it's not out there. You know.
Well, I think it seems out there until you break it down piece by piece.
Right.
As a whole, it seems, one, very overwhelming. Two, it sounds very contrived and made up, and also a little bit crazy. But once you start breaking it down a little bit by little bit, then you can connect the dots, and it doesn't seem or sound impossible.
No, because and Alex Jones found this. He went and recorded years and years and years ago. Basically, you have all these powerful people coming together and doing all this weird shit. They would have waiters, young kids. There was a lot of homosexuality, a lot of weird stuff going on, and they would do rituals and all this stuff. So that's rooted and based in occultism. So how prevalent is this stuff?
Well, I think that that's upper echelon Illuminati, occultism. That's a whole higher level than what you have going on in like a Hellier situation, or not Hellier, in the Helltown situation. I think as far as this is concerned, I think this is a group of people that want to continue to make the town prosper and continue with the ritual that has been going on for hundreds of years.
Right. I think there's levels and steps, like you said. You have upper echelons and you have the lower, but I think they're all.
So I mean, I think like Illuminati, celebrity, that sort of thing is like for power. It's power based. control-based society wanting to take control of minds and things like that, where I think this is just sort of a situation of small town wanting to continue the growth of that small town.
Oh, that's crazy. I think your Wendigo touched a nerve, don't you?
I think it did.
I mean, you have a lot of stuff that we're dealing with. We have the cave systems, we're having anomalies, right. We have geomagnetic waves. We have all sorts of stuff. Like if you look at any one particular piece, there's a whole host of information on any one of these little subjects that could take you down a rabbit hole. But if you pull yourself back out, you can see the bigger picture.
Right, because I mean, if they're saying that things are coming out of the Mammoth Cave system via Hellier, and you've got, little kids that are told not to go near the opening of the caves at nighttime because creatures come out of there and march through the woods at night. Mm-hmm. Yes, it sounds like a cautionary tale to keep your kids from going somewhere that they shouldn't be going, but it's passed down from generation to generation. Mm-hmm. I think that there's got to be some legitimacy to those stories. So if something's coming out of the Mammoth Cave system in Kentucky, in my mind, what's stopping anything from coming out of the cave system that's connected to that cave system in Ohio?
What if they're trying to protect it? What if these groups, whatever, are trying to protect their cave system because they use it somehow, or it contains something?
Well, I mean, maybe it's the in-between, which we really haven't talked about, where this cave system is in the in-between our world, their world, and they come and go. The fact is, it's so about them discovering the part that feeds into it, and they're walking through the cave system where you're ankle deep, you're neck deep, you're shining your flashlight onto creatures that are blinded by the light because they've never seen anything but the darkness of the cave.
Oh yeah. Yeah, and there's some cave systems that have been their own ecosystem for many, many, many years.
Right.
And until you find it and you go into it, you've had a whole biosystem in there that's never seen the light of day. Yeah. Mm-hmm. That is fascinating.
So, I mean, to me, it's not impossible. So it kicks my my gyrorometer up a little bit, and I think, okay, maybe it's not an impossible theory to think that there could be something like a Wendigo coming in and out of that cave system that these tribes and even today are seeing.
I mean, the Wendigo is like an undercurrent story where you have Bigfoot, it was up above the water, and you have the Wendigo, which is kind of down here. The Wendigo that's down here. So,
right.
What's going on with that? Maybe it's the bigger picture. Maybe Bigfoot's the fancier one, and Wendigo's kind of got a little bit more meat on the bones. You know what I'm
saying? Maybe the Wendigo's just really hungry.
Yeah, maybe.
Like it's said to be. Yeah. All right, you guys. Well, thanks for listening to our Wendigo rant and our theories. And if you guys have any questions or any comments, you know where to leave those. Until next time.